listener production.
Hey, Katrina here with you. Well, we all know there are all sorts of ways to control someone in a partnership. We've heard a lot about coercive control and gaslighting. And when we talk about partnerships here, it might be a romantic relationship or it could be a business relationship. The explosion in digital communications has created a whole heap of awareness around the kinds of control that people can have in relationships. And now there's a new term that's doing the rounds. It's called weaponised incompetence. To explain what this is and the warning signs, I'm joined by psychologist Jocelyn Brewer. Dr. Brewer, thank you for joining us. Firstly, what is weaponised incompetence?
Yeah, look, absolutely. Strategically avoiding responsibility. The people who duck and weave and who use, that thing, that new thing, that complex thing to avoid doing the labour, which really just then adds to the unequal division of labour that usually is between men and women.
Now, is this an actual condition? Have there been studies done on this?
There are people who study it, just like there's people who study gaslighting, but gaslighting is not necessarily a recognised, psychological condition. It's kind of just part of our popular culture and our conversations that we have to try and understand more about human behaviour, which is super important because as humans, we do tend to show up in all these ways where patterns can be seen. So it's not obviously a clinical term, but yeah, even yesterday in therapy with clients, I hear aspects of this coming through. And look, to be honest, reflecting on this, I probably do some of this in my own home. I am not the cook and I will feign incompetence with cooking. So I was reflecting on that with my husband last night, actually.
I was thinking about, whether this is a condition, say like gaslighting, which is usually associated with emotional abuse. There's surely a spectrum of weaponized incompetence, right? Because, I sometimes try and get out of cleaning up the kitchen, but it can be more serious than that.
Yeah, this is not just, I haven't learned to do this. Can you show me? I really want to get better. This is a continual kind of, how can I duck and weave? How can I continue to shift that labour, whether it's emotional labour or physical labour, over to other people? And yes, it's absolutely a spectrum. It can just be anxiety. Say, I'm, a perfectionistic kind of person. I don't want to show up and I don't want to show people that there's things that I suck at. And so I kind of play this role, and it is a pattern and a habit that you might play just in a dyad or you might play within the context of work, for instance. But on the kind of more severe end, it can be a way of control. And it's used in this way, not necessarily, again, to play to your strengths. And you're really good at that. If you do that, I'll do this other, job. It's actually like, no, you're great at that. Therefore, we should just stack all of these other kind of tasks onto you.
Yeah, I was particularly interested in thinking around where it could be quite damaging for women and the division of labour in the home. And I know so many times I've heard men, when they've become new parents, say, I'll just leave the first 6 to 12 months up to, I have no role here. The baby doesn't want me. And I sort of think, really? And that's why I'm not going to get up in the night. Is that the kind of thing we're talking about?
Absolutely, yes. That's where a lot of it starts, I think, is around caregiving, that there are those gender roles that, you have that role, you have that, primary carer role. And increasingly we know that a child can do with lots of primary carers, and the way that load is actually shared is really useful to, say, a birth mother and, with breastfeeding and all of those other sorts of things, to then try and help share that load, to give everyone the opportunity to kind of sleep, which is like the number one well-being hack I give to most of my clients.
The other thing about weaponized incompetence, which can be quite slippery and tricky, is it comes often in the form of a compliment, so flattery around, but you're so good at this, so you're much better than me. You'll do a better job.
Yes.
That's a real pitfall, isn't it?
It is, because it can feel, especially again for women who are not necessarily good at taking compliments, or feel like, well, if I'm good at it, I should keep going and this is my role and my contribution, that we then are also really good. And, there's that saying, give a busy person a job and it'll get done, that they then take on more and more, which then depletes them, not only physically and psychologically, but then really can disrupt a relationship and start to kind of, create that conflict and resentment. And that's the start of a bigger downfall within relationships, which gets quite tricky. It's also, I guess, within that, helping people have better strategies at being able to spot it and then to coach through it. And again, I use the example of, well, this is different to playing to our strengths. I'm so good at this because I did it a lot. And you too have the opportunity to do a lot of washing or a lot of insert the thing that you're trying to avoid. And so part of that is being able to say, thank you, let me share my skills with you and help you be as good as me too.
Yeah, let's get into how to spot it, because gaslighting is super hard to spot. It's almost like the frog in the boiling pot of water that you don't often realize until it's too late. So how do you tell if somebody's employing this tactic of weaponized incompetence on you?
I think a part of it is just noticing patterns and noticing where some of that communication sits. And I don't think we necessarily have really good lessons in what a relationship should look like or what communication in relationships should look like. It really relies on us, hanging out with our friends saying, oh, he said this, he did that, whatever that storytelling might be. And usually in those contexts, they're not like in a therapeutic relationship with somebody who's going to be able to sit there and kind of neutralize it and look at things from both sides. So it is tricky, but being able to get different senses of other relationships and what would a better division of labor look like. I refer people to this great set of cards called the Fair Play cards. But Fair Play is awesome, and that will actually take you through dividing up the labor and looking at what are those jobs that you actually don't want to do, and finding ways to then sometimes outsource them if you're in that position to be able to do that, or be able to set up a bit of a timetable and come up with a solution.
I would imagine too that the person who's employing these tactics, whether it be at work or in the home, they're getting big wins out of this. They're not having to do as much. So the onus or the impetus for change, I can't imagine would be that great for them. How do you get these people to change?
Yeah, well, in the workplace, it's about systemic change. It's actually about making sure that there's much more equity and recognition for some of the things like organising the birthday cakes each month or the morning teas and all of those things, which, again, traditionally, women would easily go and pick up a cake on the way to work or make those things happen. And with that incompetence, it's really then about being able to identify where somebody's not doing their job and getting HR involved, which for most of us, we're like, no, we don't want to go that far.
Yeah.
We just want other people to know that you can pop in and get that cake on the way to work. Like, we would love to hand that stuff back over. And because those things are so small, often women are made to feel a little bit hysterical for saying, oh, I've got to do all these things. And they're like, well, it's just picking up a cake. And it's like, well, why don't you do it? Well, because it's so easy. So it becomes this catch-22.
Yeah.
And a really great example that I read around this is it starts as early as the playground. So you have a bunch of kids and you say, everyone run around and pick up some papers and everyone will get a reward. There's a certain group of people who are going to goof off and not pick up any papers. There's a certain group who go and pick up the papers. You can guess which gender does which. Broadly speaking, everyone gets a snack. So what does that teach the group of people who goof off when the people who do the work don't get any different reward or recognition for doing what was asked?
So, Jocelyn, how do you call out these behaviours?
That's a really tricky one because it depends on context and it depends on your own psychological safety in those situations. So if you feel like you have a boss who is the person who is eschewing some of their responsibility to you, then you need to find somebody who is a bit of an ally and that you can, in confidence, be able to talk about some of those things. And so from situation to situation, that is quite different. And I think you have to go not super carefully, but I do think there can be a washout of calling things out if you don't have an ear where somebody's going to be receptive to that. I would usually start by talking about, like, I'm noticing this pattern. I'm feeling like My solution for that would be, hey, why don't we have a roster for the morning tea? Or could we think more systemically again about how this can be shared around? I'm happy to show people how I've been doing it.
Yes. Great suggestions. And if anyone's listening and they're going, oh no, this could be me, I could be the problem here.
Yeah.
What suggestions do you have for them?
Look, own it. I think most people would be absolutely delighted to hear like, oh, in my own case, I don't like cooking. When I cook, I don't do a very good job. It's not on purpose, but we play to our strengths in this household. I just know that's not my thing, and we have an agreement around that. So being able to say, hey, I have noticed that I do this thing where I duck and weave, and I'm actually really challenged by it. It's challenging my sense of parenthood or, my abilities. Like, I like being really good at stuff. How can we shift this so I can take some ownership and responsibility of that back? So usually it's about owning it and correcting it.
And stepping up in other areas where you do feel like you want to contribute. All great suggestions. Thank you again.
Cheers.
That was psychologist Dr. Jocelyn Brewer. And as she said, this kind of stuff gets normalised quite early on, and it really is the responsibility of parents and caregivers and teachers to recognising themselves when they're allowing this so that it doesn't become endemic and habitual. Super interesting topic. We would love to hear from you guys. If you've got any thoughts or any of your own personal stories about this, hit us up on our socials and do share your experiences. Thank you for listening to today's briefing. That is all for this episode. A reminder too that we put out full eps of our weekend briefing chats on YouTube. You can search the Listener Newsroom to see them. And if you liked this episode or you think that, a friend or someone you love could benefit from the info, please share it with them too. I'm Katrina Blowers, and I will see you next time. Listener.